Welcome to the Long Take Review, a film podcast with one eye always on the Oscar race. I'm your host, Jen Bankard, and I'm here with two Oscar prognosticators. I love that word. First, he's due. It's his time. It's Greg Cass. How's it going, Greg?
Merry Christmas, movie house. Merry Christmas, Emporium. Merry Christmas, you wonderful old building and loan. Hi, Jen. It's the holidays, and we're going to do movies. And so, holiday movies. Good to be here.
I didn't see that coming at all. That was great. And he's never going to get over that snub. It's PT McNiff. How's it going, PT?
Acid rain, drug addictions, international terrorism, freeway killers. Now more than ever, it is important to remember the true meaning of Christmas. Don't miss Charles Dickens' immortal classic, Scrooge. Your life might just depend on it.
We're in the wrong business. We should be cutting trailers with your voiceover. That's amazing. So we are here today, in the spirit of the season. Apparently, I didn't realize we were going to lean so heavily to the holiday theme because my brain's on the Oscar race. So we are here today with both eyes on the Oscar race. We're going to share our pre-holiday predictions in 8 categories: the 4 acting categories, 2 screenplay categories, Best Director and Best Picture. So a lot could change between now and Oscar Sunday, but we thought now would be a good time right before the holidays to take the temperature of the race and some of its biggest categories. So if you are listening to us for the first time, usually we start with a spoiler-free section. Since we're just talking about award season, the whole thing will be spoiler-free, right? If we're just going to be talking about sort of the awards prospects, we will try our best not to divulge too much about the plots of these films by way of talking about their Oscar chances. PT, if people hear our wild predictions, which may or may not be accurate in like a few weeks, and they want to hear more and want to keep up with kind of our reporting on the Oscar race, what can they do?
Well, if they don't want to miss a second of the presents we leave under the tree for various Oscar thoughts, they can follow the podcast at the Substack, hosted by Jen, thelongtake.substack.com. People are welcome to follow us wherever they get their podcasts: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, whatever. And they can subscribe. They can also add a rating and a review if they feel so inclined. And they can also follow us on Instagram and Threads at The Long Take Review, where there will be posts alerting them when there's new content.
Thanks, PT. So the way we're going to approach this is sort of debate style, where we've each assigned different categories to one of the 3 of us, and that person will sort of take the lead in that category, share their list of potential nominees, and then there will be a rebuttal period where the other 2 people in among the 3 of us can chime in and sort of object or suggest alternatives or just generally discuss sort of the validity of these predictions. So we're going to start with supporting actor. Now, I gave this category to Greg because he is Ke Huy Quan's #1 fan. And so I was like, it'd be really fitting if we gave him supporting actor since Ke Huy Quan won last year. So Greg, take it away. Who do you think gets in for supporting actor?
All right. And I also just want to note that we all signed a blood oath digitally to not do our personal picks or our favorites, but to try to get who we think is actually going to get into the category. So I tackled this first one really with my head more than my heart, which is my general approach. But I will also say, some of the major players in this category I still haven't seen. So this was probably my kind of most guessing one. So here's who I think will be in for the 5. I think we will see, and I will say these are going to go, I'm going to start at the bottom. So the ones I'm least sure of up to the locks. So from least confident to most confident. So per our last conversation, you all convinced me that Robert De Niro will still get in for Killers of the Flower Moon. Mark Ruffalo should get in for Poor Things. Then I'm almost positive we'll see these top 3. Ryan Gosling for Barbie, Robert Downey Jr. for Oppenheimer, and the one I am now going to go ahead and say is definite and is the front runner in the race, in my opinion, is Charles Melton for May December. Now, I'm going to offer that with apologies to Robert Downey Jr. Robert Downey Jr. has done fantastic things for Hollywood and a real likable guy and should deserve some recognition. But I'm seeing us currently sitting in a little bit of an Oppenheimer slump because it came out a long time ago and people aren't thinking as much about it. So I'm thinking unless Downey gets out there and does some real high quality schmoozing, of which I'm sure he's quite capable, I think it's going to be Charles Melton as of this moment.
That is hard to argue with. And actually, I think I can't remember which event they were at, but they took a photograph together. And it really felt like a reenactment of Oppenheimer, where it was like, oh, like you think that you're getting this Oscar, and this younger hotshot is just gonna like pull the rug out from under you. I can't. I think Charles Melton he's one of those contenders that's just consistently getting all of the precursors so far. Granted, we're only a little bit into the precursors season, but there's nothing to indicate that that's going to stop anytime soon.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that is the trajectory. I don't know if that's where it's going to end up. But I think this is the great call for now in terms of both the distribution of the people in the list and also what's the order, the ranking of it. I mean, I might flip Ruffalo and Gosling, but looking at the Oscar race subreddit, I don't know if either of you waste your time on there. I don't necessarily recommend it because all subreddits can be scary at any time. But someone in the Oscar race subreddit, one of the pinned posts is a table that updates just sort of number of nominations, number of wins across any and all precursors, critics, and all of that. And the most nominated person in supporting actor right now is Ryan Gosling. He's had the most across all of them, with Melton in second, 12 versus 11, Robert Downey Jr. at 9, and then Ruffalo at 6, tied with. And so I guess I'll just put this name out, even though I don't think there's a lot of possibilities that he'll actually get in. Glenn Howerton for Blackberry, who also has 6 nominations across the various critics awards. As we have said, they're not like the most obvious or direct precursor or they don't necessarily lead to, oh, if critics say it, it must be true when it comes to the Academy Awards. But I will note that the other person that I will note, two people, I guess. One is still lurking, and I think still possible as the movie starts to roll out, is Willem Dafoe in Poor Things. We sort of talked about this with the Golden Globes discussion the other day, but he's long overdue, has never actually won, but gotten a lot of nominations. Could that be something, if there is a renewed sort of surge, or not renewed, but if there's a surge happening for Poor Things, if that occurs, he might get swept up, and both actors, like in The Favorite, 2 supporting performances get nominated from a Lanthimos movie. Could happen. And the other one that I had sort of lurking potentially is Sterling K. Brown, who's gotten a few critics nominations for critics groups. And if American Fiction starts to, people are getting into it, he's an excellent actor. I haven't seen the movie, but he is an excellent actor. I have no doubt he does a good job in the movie, and people might start to gravitate towards him, if De Niro perhaps being the one who might fall away. Those might be names that could slide in.
Yeah, I'm also hearing the buzz for Sterling K. Brown. I feel like he was not in the conversation, and then the past week or two, he is now suddenly on these lists of people rattling off names.
I have not seen American Fiction either, but I will say, having read the book and thinking I know who he plays, it's a meaty role. And again, who knows how much it's been adapted yet. I just want to note, since I didn't get to talk about it, I'm going to just say I did not love May December. I will say I was very impressed with Charles's performance. I think it's a little showier than Natalie Portman or Julianne Moore. You have to be really paying attention for those two. But any scene that he's in, he really captures. And there's a important scene on a rooftop, I'll keep it spoiler free, that I think kind of showcases what's going on with him. And I think it's worth celebrating, and it's always good to get quite a few have been mentioned, but people of color into these races, because Oscars So White is not that far in the rear view. So to make sure we have good representation across the category is important.
I was gonna say Charles Melton has just a vulnerability in his scenes in May December that a lot of these nominees, I granted that some of them we haven't seen, but a lot of these nominees don't necessarily have, like, they have very different types of performances. So I think that gives him a big advantage. Just to throw another name in the hat, this doesn't help with the Oscars So White problem necessarily, but Holt McCanney is the dad in The Iron Claw, which I haven't seen yet, but that's one that like could be a sleeper kind of contender. So I think if people really are into that movie and it gets a bunch of nominations, he might sneak in. But yeah, I'm trying to think. This is the problem with lists like this where everyone's kind of settled on these 5 at this point. The question then becomes, okay, what's going to be the confusing surprise, right? Like where we're like, wait, what? We didn't see that. Maybe it's the Glenn Howerton, but there's going to be, I feel like there's going to be something like that. We're assuming too much.
Yeah, I mean, and this is part of, it's not as drastically premature as the last time we talked the categories, but there's still like, most people in the general public, including us, have not seen The Iron Claw, have not seen American Fiction. So there's we haven't seen The Color Purple. There's these movies that, Greg and I were talking on mic, but off the record before Jen came in, about how, is it possible? It feels like one of those movies hasn't come out yet, might come in and make a big splash, and people will be like, oh, this one. And then suddenly there'll be some percolating for folks that maybe hadn't been considered before. And so that could be a surprise. It's also no guarantees that there's surprises in every category. There's usually a few that go as expected, and then others that get upended somehow. I tried to upend when it came to my turn. So
nice. All right, so that's a good segue. PT has got supporting actress next. So who's on your list? Who makes it in?
I do, and I wasn't trying like Greg. I was not coming with these. This is who I want to be nominated or who I want to win. But I was trying to make predictions when it came to, like, I don't know, like, who's going to get that last slot. I did sort of lean towards, well, what if there's a shakeup? What if there's something that's unexpected? Again, I lean towards the assumption there might be snubs. So I'm going to go the opposite of Greg's order. I'm going to go from the most, it seems most lock down to less lock. And that most lock, and I think the front runner, is Da'Vine Joy Randolph. She's won a lot of the major precursors, nominated basically everywhere from the holdovers. So I think she's in a really good position there. I have Danielle Brooks, who seems to be the person who is emerging from The Color Purple instead of Taraji P. Henson. It seems that Danielle Brooks has been getting the attention and the nominations that folks might have assumed her co-star would get. Then 2 from our Netflix episode, Jodie Foster in Nyad and Julianne Moore in May, December, who are just sort of both kind of feel like, are we sure that they're locks? And I'm not, but they feel kind of comfortably in the race, that they've kind of got their positions as, former winners who have turned in notable performances. And then for the 5th, I'm calling a snub and a little bit of an upset with an Oscar favorite, Penelope Cruz from Ferrari, getting nominated, which would of course be over Emily Blunt in Oppenheimer, sort of for the reasons that Greg was talking about for Robert Downey Jr. not winning, which is kind of feels like, not that folks have forgotten about Oppenheimer, but that Oppenheimer's getting the attention in a few categories, and maybe the sort of, it's going to get an overwhelming number of nominations, feels like that may not happen, and instead it will be concentrated on the ones it has a likelihood of winning in.
Do we know if Jodie Foster got in at the Globes? I can't remember.
I think so, but I will double check.
Okay. Because so here's my thing. One is I like the Penelope Cruz upset because that oftentimes is the surprise is an international pick. And I think Penelope Cruz is very representative of the Academy becoming more international in its membership. And so that feels right, that would be a surprise that would come in here. I feel like Emily Blunt still gets in here, though. That's my objection to this. I think unlike the two of you, maybe I'm biased, but I feel like Oppenheimer's not going anywhere anytime soon. I think it's still really strong. And the fact that it's still this strong and this much in the conversation, getting as many precursors and nominations as it has been, despite coming out over the summer. The other thing is the Barbenheimer factor. I think anything Oppenheimer and Barbie are going to dominate in nominations. I think that's what they've been doing so far. And I think that is the thing. If that weren't true, then I would agree that maybe Emily Blunt gets lost in the shuffle. But I think because of that, she's going to get swept up in Oppenheimer's success on nomination morning.
I think that's very fair. I will just note Jodie Foster did get a Golden Globe nomination. And Emily Blunt did as well. The sixth one is in addition to Danielle Brooks and Davine Joy Randolph and Julianne Moore, the sixth nominee was Rosamund Pike for Saltburn.
Oh, interesting. That's the Golden Globes loves her. I think she won for the Scamming Old People movie that I've mentioned before, weirdly, on this podcast.
I believe it's I Care a Lot is the name of the movie.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Scamming old people, I think is the full title.
Yeah. So I'd say actually Julianne Moore is probably going to be the one that gets booted out if Emily Blunt's back in this list. I don't know. What do you think, Greg?
I think this list is terrible, and I want to offer 5 other. No, I'm just kidding. But I will say I think I agree with your reasoning. But I'm gonna zag a different way, which is to say I think there's a chance America Ferrera sneaks into this. If it's a big Barbie kind of tidal wave, a big pink tidal wave, right? Or a big plastic tidal wave. I don't know which metaphor you want to go for or which image you want to go for. And the reason I'm thinking that is because America Ferrera, beloved, been around Hollywood a long time, worked with a lot of people, and also has the perfect Oscar reel. Emily Blunt does too, but to put America up doing her monologue, I kind of like that as kind of something to shake it up. I was thinking about, was it 2 years ago that PT's Penelope Cruz surprise played out when she was nominated for the Almodovar movie, which she was very good in, but it was kind of, it was all the things you were both just describing. And so I kind of feel like that's happened before and recently enough that we maybe don't need to do that again. So I'd rather see America Ferrera. One that's way outside is, I think, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret is quietly cooking on the side and doing pretty good streaming business. And every critic I listen to loves that movie. I have not seen that one. And in particular thinks Rachel McAdams is incredible. And I mean, I also think Rachel McAdams is incredible, but in this film, I have not seen her. So I think the fact that adaptation really enriched the role of the mother in a beloved book for particularly people who are the age of voting in the Academy, I think that's like the slimmest of slim chances. But if there's a surprise to be had, I might put my money on that.
You say that it's slim, but Rachel McAdams has the only win that's not Davine Joy Randolph in the precursors that have been announced. It's interesting. 7, almost fully across the board, 7 wins, except for 1, and it was to Rachel McAdams. So that was my 7th place. Emily Blunt in 6th.
I like it.
Rachel McAdams in 7th.
My counter argument to the America Ferrera pick, as much as I would love to see that, is, and I'm borrowing this from Dan Baer. I think he was on Awards Watch, though he is often on Next Best Picture, so it could have been there too. But he was saying that the monologue is voters are going to associate their love of that monologue with the script more than her, because she is sort of like a vehicle for the writing, even though her performance is great, but that people are going to kind of like, when they see that and think of that, they're going to think less of her, but more of, and this is a good segue into my category, which is next, original screenplay. Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach wrote that. So yeah, so that was sort of the counter argument, is that like, it's less about America Ferrera. She's just the vessel through to deliver the original screenplay for Barbie. So that's actually my number 1. And I think, it's interesting because I think when we did our our premature predictions, I was like, let's not overcook Barbie. Like let's calm down. Like it still is like a very mainstream sort of blockbuster film. So let's not overestimate how well it's going to do. I don't think that anymore, because I think just today Critics' Choice nominations came out. The big headline is that Barbie got 18 nominations, which is a record for Critics' Choice. Like, it has the most nominations of any film nominated by Critics' Choice Awards. And so because of that, I'm now like, oh, let's get all in on Barbie. I think, with the exception of what I just said about America Ferrera potentially, I'm much more likely to be like, oh, Barbie's getting in, than maybe I would have even just a few weeks ago. So I have Barbie at number 1, original screenplay. I have Past Lives at number 2. That has just been dominating precursors so far, in a way that I was trying to manage my expectations and be like, people might forget about this little movie. It seems like they haven't. So I think that gets in. And I'd say, like, if you watch that movie, the biggest takeaway is, wow, the writing. So I think that even if that's its only nomination, which I hope it isn't, it's probably going to get in here. I'm going to do a last minute switch, because I had The Holdovers here originally, but I think Holdovers kind of struck out at Golden Globes despite them loving Alexander Payne. And so now I don't really know what to make of that. I talked myself into like, well, maybe that's because that means that the Oscars will love it even more, because it's like they're anti-Golden Globes. Not necessarily that they're consciously anti-Golden Globes, but what they would pick might be the opposite of Golden Globes. So if, like, Golden Globes loved all of Alexander Payne's other movies, but they don't like this one, then maybe Oscars therefore is going to like this one more. That seemed convoluted. So then I was like, maybe it's just like this is the Holdovers is not going to actually get in as many places as we think it is. So I'm moving that one down to the bottom. I actually say Anatomy of a Fall is going to be next, because that's the one that has really been popping up in lots of places. And despite not being France's choice for international feature, I think it's going to have a pretty big day. Not to spoil a future category that I have, but so I think it's definitely getting in there. And, if you go listen to our review of that film, all we're talking about is the writing. I'm pretty sure in that episode, and how intricate and thoughtful and sort of like juicy the screenplay is. So that I think is getting in next. And then I have in fourth place, I have May December, which I think I did not originally have in my list, but I now am including in here because it's been doing really well in a lot of precursors. Generally, the reception to it, unless you're Greg, has been really positive, and I think that movie's going to overperform on nominations day. So and I think if they can get the narrative out there of this is Sammy Birch was a casting director, this is her first screenplay, if that gets in the water and people are like, wow, like, really, like, that was her first screenplay, and like, it's so perfect because it's about the movie's about an actor and she's a casting director, so of course she would have this unlock. So I think that for that reason I'm putting it in there, but there are viable alternatives I'm willing to hear out.
To be fair, people are only just now hearing Greg's negative take on May December, so that's going to really cool the momentum, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yep, the opposite of Greg Mentum. Well, and my operating theory, as I have voiced not on mic to you two, is that I think critics are either May December people or Saltburn people, and it's like, what's your kind of weird flavor? I certainly don't want to say melodrama, because the director of May December has gotten very mad about that, or camp. I think is the other word.
He's gotten mad about camp, not melodrama. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And so I will just put out there that, for whatever reason, the Academy loved Promising Young Woman, and I think gave Emerald Fennell Best Original Screenplay for that. So I think there's still an outside chance that Saltburn makes it in somewhere, and this would probably be where I would say a nomination, not a win. And my only other comment on Jen's good breakdown is, like, let's not ever get desensitized to the fact that we say Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach wrote the Barbie movie. Like, there's a universe where, like, 2 years ago that would have just, like, immediately struck us dead on the street if that sentence came out in public. So I don't want to lose sight of that, but I think your list is pretty good. I'm sad the Holdovers is fading a little, but I do think if it's not going to be the kind of lock on the major categories, then this is one that falls away pretty quick, because the script is pretty good. It isn't Alexander Payne, remember. It's he has a screenwriter, but
Right. So if people know that, then that changes
yeah.
I think.
But I will say, even when I saw him in a Q&A right after, he's like, that guy deserves the credit, but this is kind of my idea, because he gave him all the pieces, I believe, except for he did let the credited screenwriter have credit for Dave Ihn's character. That was his addition. So
People are saying that I think Dave Ihn is safe. And
Yeah.
I think that if there's holdover fade, that it's goes down to her as the lone nominee. If that makes sense.
And I'm going to assert that you get her in front of a crowd of people with a microphone, and from the first speech she gets to give onward, I think she's just going to win more and more people over, very much like Kehe Kwan did last year, and so many others have the Coda cast and so on.
She has the best chance to go tape to tape of just no real competition, winning all of the awards. But I think that we have talked about this, but I'll reiterate it. We talked about it in earlier episodes. I think that both Jen and I can't speak for Greg, believe in the sort of spread it around, that there's more people than not in the Academy that think about like, okay, we've got all these movies. Let's try to make sure everyone might have a chance at least getting a little something, which doesn't always happen. Like last year really was dominated by 2 movies, but frequently it does sort of end up where, especially when there seems to be a number of quality movies, things start to sort of concentrate where there's stuff like, well, okay, we all love Davine Joy Randolph. She's the front runner. She's winning all these. She's very likely to win. Maybe we don't need to worry about the holdovers in these other categories. I wouldn't say it's still, I don't think it's likely that would be the only one, only because I think there might be some below the line love for that production design and stuff like that. But yeah, I think that in this top sort of above the line top 8, it is possible that it ends up with just Davine. But in terms of our original screenplays, I would like to note it's still very strange that sequels have to be adapted because it's a sequel to something.
So weird.
But a movie based on a product that is like that has existed for so many years can be original, even though it is based on a pre-existing characters. Hey, whatever, good for them. I want them to be here. I think adapted screenplay is more of a fight. I'll just note, I think the outside one, and I don't know if it would actually replace a movie on this list. If it does, it's probably The Holdovers, which I'm not happy about, is Maestro, which I think people are saying, there's more positivity towards it than I think there were when it came out at festivals. Bradley Cooper also has his name on it, and people are like, let's have Bradley Cooper win an Oscar. Maybe if he doesn't end up sticking as a frontrunner in actor, director, picture, he could get might get some love with the nomination. I don't think that means that he wins, but it's possible that gets him into the room, so to speak.
Greg, I think, is the only one among us who's seen that movie. So
yes, and I'll stay spoiler free, and I will confess, this is a deep tease for a later episode. He commits one crime in Screenplay that I think is unforgivable. But I would say, so I just today listened to the DGA podcast episode of Bradley Cooper being interviewed by Todd Phillips, of all people, because of The Hangover. And they talked through, I would say, not that this is how it works, but if Bradley Cooper got to choose, he wants to be nominated as director. Definitely. And that if I got to choose, that's the one I'd give him for over that. But certainly in play, I think you implied this with your May December comments. We should never underestimate the power of the movie being on Netflix and everybody and their brother getting to see it very easily. And so the fact that Maestro hits just as everybody's got a week off, and I love you, Killers of the Flower Moon, but one of the reasons I went to Maestro last night was because it was a tight 2:05 and not 3.5 hours. So I can see a lot of families throwing this on and saying, well, let's check this out. We know a little bit about this and so on. So that's where I'd put that.
Never underestimate the power of Netflix to get a nomination or to stop it from winning. because people don't want to vote for Netflix
because people
movies.
are like, oh wait, this is Netflix? Never mind.
Mm.
Has the stink of streaming on it. My last comment I'll say, because I don't know if I'll have a chance to say this later, is to add to the Barbie love. If you watch the Actors on Actors interview with Cillian Murphy and Margot Robbie, she spends so much time talking about Greta and Noah and how their writing process and like the whole narrative of how she just let them write the script, and then when they brought it back, like, and I think she said that they had only sort of talked about it. Like, she's like, we had meetings to check in. Oh, how's it going? But she's like, I didn't read anything until it was done. And then she was like, they're never going to let us make this movie. It's a brilliant and amazing, but they're never going to let us make this movie. And then they did. So I think if more sort of behind the scenes stories get out about Greta and Noah, I think Barbie has a good shot in this category.
I'm gonna just add, as long as the crowds remember the America Ferrera monologue and forget that Will Ferrell was in the movie, because that's the thing I can't get over. That whole segment,
That's
it's
true.
like that just didn't work at all, and I have trouble personally saying that I would vote for that one for that reason. But I'm gonna create the segue to my category, because I will say I'm gonna talk about best adapted screenplay, and to me the greatest all time snub here is the fact that Greta Gerwig didn't win for her absolutely brilliant adaptation of Little Women. And why that came to mind is because the adaptation did something really innovative, right? It took the two halves of Little Women and it intercut them in a way that just brought out this whole new richness to this old text, and it's really wonderful. So that was heavy on my mind when I was thinking about this category, primarily because of what I still think is the lock of all locks, which is Killers of the Flower Moon, which was a hugely popular book and was read by, everybody, and then became, the Martin Scorsese movie. And so much of the discussion of that is how he has, quote unquote, corrected the book, or, made the Osage more central than the narrative. The book is about the FBI agent and the kind of founding of the FBI. I forget the exact wording, but that's the subtitle of the book. And so I do think he deserves a lot of credit for actually bringing out something stronger. I would also say that his choices towards the end of the film make adaptation a part of the film's thesis, and that makes it a really interesting kind of pick in this category. So I will say I'm giving into peer pressure and going with my lock first. So that is absolutely a lock to me. I would follow that up by American Fiction. These would be the two books I've read in this category. I never got through American Prometheus for Oppenheimer, which is the third pick on my list, followed by Poor Things and Zone of Interest. I'm going with these five. I'm the softest on Zone of Interest. I think we've all noted, and we noted in the Golden Globes episode, it's not dead, but it's kind of fading out of the conversation. I think, again, if it were on Netflix and everybody were watching it, that would be different, or at least had the option to watch it. Why I went Zone of Interest is because Martin Amis, who wrote the original book, did not do the adaptation, but wrote the original book, is a beloved author, and he died this year. And so I think the writing is kind of on display a little bit, or being looked at a little bit more. I understand it's a loose adaptation. It is not very faithful to the book. So I slotted that in for number 5. For which one I think will win, I think, I mean, I said this a couple episodes ago, I want there to be a big rise in American Fiction. It seems like it's beloved. It was the Toronto winner. It's getting lots of awards. And as that rises up, I would love to see that take this on. I am speaking as somebody who read the novel and watched the trailer multiple times, including just a couple hours ago at the movies. It looks pretty faithful. I think everything in the trailer, I was like, yeah, I remember that scene in the book. Although I will say the book is very much set in Washington, D.C., and this is very much set in Boston. So thank you, film tax breaks, that changed to that. So I'm going to put that as the leader here, although you could very easily talk to me about Killers of the Flower Moon. instead. Uh, Other things that could be in the mix, a big rise out of Color Purple would obviously put that in contention here. And just because I made a big deal out of Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, a few categories ago, I think it has to be name checked here as another outside possibility. Again, a beloved book and an adaptation that, at least by what I've heard, does some, again, I use that word very carefully, some correcting, some updating of the story in a way that matters. So I think that's the lay of the land here.
That's the one that I was going to chime in with, because typically, because not a lot of voters read a lot of books.
Wow.
Sorry. That's just something I've heard from lots of critics complaining. That so recognizable titles, like, and the more literary, the better chances it has in this category. You know what I mean? Like, so I think that's a good argument for Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, because that's a book that lots of people, just by the title, even if they haven't seen the movie, even if they haven't read the book since they were a kid, they could be like, oh yeah, that one. Great. Get it in there. Yeah. So but I think what's interesting is I feel like this is the most competitive this category has been in a little while, because it's not just the fact that they took a text and then adapted it. It's like the adaptation itself is so interesting for a lot of the films that you mentioned.
Agreed with everything that both of you are saying. The only other movie I wanted to throw out, which I don't think cracks the 5, but maybe it could if the cards fall in the right order for it, is All of Us Strangers, which has been getting some love from the critics in this category. I don't think has won anything, but is this one is no movie has won more than one critics award for this. It's very distributed. So there is one win for All of Us Strangers, one for Zone of Interest, Poor Things, American Fiction, Oppenheimer, and one win for a movie called The Eight Mountains, which I don't know what that is, and I don't know who gave it to them. But I think All of Us Strangers is one of those things that got a lot of hype at first, and then has sort of drifted away, and has that chance to be that movie that at the end of December comes out and suddenly everyone's like, oh yeah, like this movie's incredible, especially if it gets into a place. I don't know if it necessarily has to be on streaming. Maybe if it's rentals for actual voters, maybe it's the screeners, where again, it seems to be like it's very sad and pulling at your heartstrings, but not as dire not necessarily in a bad way, but as sort of bleak an experience as the Zone of Interest. So the one thing I'll push back on what Greg said is I don't know if the Zone of Interest was on streaming that it would help its chances, because I don't know if, like, we finished Christmas dinner, let's just gather around and fire up the Zone of Interest, and see what it looks like. Though I am curious, to try to speak very carefully, I guess, what current geopolitical situations might do to impact the support, just sort of almost like context-free support for a movie like The Zone of Interest. That's interesting. Is that going to make it more likely to get some nominations? Is it going to actually hold it back in some way? But yeah, it's very interesting to see what happens with that, especially when it starts to roll out, which again, it hasn't yet. It hasn't started appearing in theaters. So we'll see how people react when it's seen by more of the public.
I was just going to say, I'm not somebody who does the campaigns for these major releases, but can I just say one thing? Let people see the movies. We would like to see the movies, please. And then maybe we would be behind it and talk on our podcast about it. And I want to be clear, I'm not arguing that we deserve screeners. I'm saying let the public see the movies. What was the lesson from Argo, right? Like, put it out in October, everybody sees it, and we get there. And there was a big Dune 2 size hole in our Octobers that nothing stepped into, and somebody could be really cleaning up right now. But Jen, you were making a real point, not just having sour grapes.
Oh, I was just going to say, in general, Zone of Interest has not been doing well at the precursors that we've seen so far. And I think it's for exactly what PT was talking about, is that people know it's critically acclaimed and know it's a movie they should see, but they're like, it's never the right time to sit down and be like, let's watch a movie about a concentration camp. but it's interesting. I think from what I've heard in terms of reactions to that movie, it's much more complimenting the direction and not the screenplay necessarily. So I feel like for that reason, if more people see it, it still might not get in. The only thing kind of pulling it in the category right now is that the international factor, right? That it's that Zone of Interest and Anatomy of Fall are sort of the two big international films that seem to be popping up in lots of places and predictions. So yeah, I just want to jump into. I almost saw Eight Mountains at Sundance. So I know it was a movie I'd heard of and people had said was really good. It's an Italian film about two men, and I couldn't tell you the rest of the plot, so I probably shouldn't even brought it up. But
Two Men and Eight Mountains.
Two Men
That's the
and
full
Eight
title.
Mountains. And I think it's like I don't know. It's like about their relationship potentially. All right, let me wait. I got it here. The film depicts a friendship between two men who spend their childhood together in a remote alpine village. So really, it is about mountains and two men in mountains.
Two Men in Mountains, as
Yeah.
promised.
Um,
And you're going to be counting the whole time and then get to the last 5 minutes and be like, there's the eighth one. Got it.
Nailed it. Yes.
and to
Screenplay.
respond to Greg's "Let us see the movies," I totally agree with this, but just let's appreciate how much better it is than it used to be, because it used to be so hard. I used to have to wait until the week before the Oscars, or even sometimes I'm like, oh, that movie's not even coming out until after the Oscars on like.
Yeah.
So I think it has improved accessibility of the films, particularly I like to watch at home. They pop up a lot sooner than they used to. But
absolutely
that's true.
As the completionist, I will say you are absolutely right, and I should appreciate that. It always comes down to the documentaries and the foreign language films, and we've already heard that we're not going to see the French. Is it a Taste of Things?
Yeah,
are not going to see that till mid-February, so that's going to be one that takes till the end. Yeah, that's the general release is mid-February.
Yeah. This doesn't help Greg, but Jen, there's going to be I've already seen ads for a bunch of screenings around LA for that because it's trying to get support. So if you do want to see it, you will be able to go to some of the specialty theaters. I will also say that part of the problem of it feels like it takes forever for these movies to come out is that we're maybe too plugged in, or at least that we are plugged in to listening to critics who go to film festivals and checking the podcasts and all of that. Whereas, most people would have just heard about American Fiction when they went to the movies in the last couple of weeks. And they're like, oh, that sounds good. When's it coming out? Oh, like in a couple of weeks? Great. Maybe I'll go see it. Whereas we've been sitting being like, where is this movie for months and months? So it's partly our fault. But also maybe we should get screeners. Maybe the studios should be sending them to us for hype purposes for Greg Mentum.
Mm-hmm. The Greg bump.
All right, PT. We're getting to
right.
These next two categories I feel like are rough. Tell us about actor.
Okay, so I might be reaching for my snub here, but again, I'm trying to read the tea leaves and see what might happen. But again, start from I think most likely down, and Cillian Murphy, number one, most likely. I don't know if he's the front runner anymore, but I still think he's the most likely to be nominated, if that makes sense. I would be the most surprised if somehow he's not in the five by nomination day. Number two is Jeffrey Wright for American Fiction, who I think now is the front runner to win. But maybe that's just the hype of the movie. But I feel like there's so much talk of how good he is, and maybe I'm sort of thinking that there's not that there's like people turning on Oppenheimer, but that it's just sort of like, yeah, Oppenheimer, but like, what about like this? And look at Jeffrey Wright and like his career. And not that he's some sort of avid campaigner, but I kind of feel like Cillian Murphy is like, I don't care, like whatever. Like I'll go out, I'll talk about this, but like he's not like someone who has come across as like hungry for an award. And so I feel like there could be people that lean towards Jeffrey Wright because he's been around longer, turned in all these great performances, etc. So those two. then I'm already at like, I could see any of the rest of these people maybe not making it ultimately. But right now I say it's Bradley Cooper, who, for all the reasons we've been talking about with Maestro and it being Netflix, and he's out there very fervently campaigning and by all accounts doing a good job in the movie. So Bradley Cooper for Maestro, and then knocked down a couple of spots Paul Giamatti for The Holdovers. I would love to have him higher and feel more confident he's getting in. Right now I think he is, but I think he could, if The Holdovers continues to sort of lose away from people's minds, that it could be, he could lose his spot here. But I hope he gets it. It's Sideways makeup time. Get him nominated for Best Actor. And then my fifth, which again is a reach, and I'm calling a snub. I have Andrew Scott in for All of Us Strangers, which is supposed to be an exceptional performance. It's a smaller movie, but it's possible that starts to get some momentum once it actually comes out and people see it and sort of consolidate around it. The snub, of course, is Leonardo DiCaprio for Killers of the Flower Moon. I don't want to not see him be nominated. My heart has him here, like probably like second or third on this list. But is it possible that, like we've been saying with Devine Joy Randolph, The Holdovers support starts to consolidate in one area? Does Lily Gladstone take a lot of the Killers of the Flower Moon, especially the acting support? And I would say, looking at our collective list, I would be happier if De Niro gets nominated and DiCaprio doesn't, than vice versa. Like, I think De Niro was incredible and was doing things that I wasn't expecting him to do. Not that Leo wasn't, not also very great in it, but yeah. So, again, I don't know if it's likely. Maybe I'm overestimating the fallback on Killers of the Flower Moon, especially when, I feel like that's a lot of people complaining about 3+ hour movies. A lot of people sort of having a conversation about like, well, I don't know if everyone's going to connect to it. It's just churning away, racking up nominations from the Globes, from Critics' Choice, from critics groups. Like, it's not really stopping. So it feels like folks are kind of saying, yeah, that's old news. But both for Oppenheimer and for Killers of the Flower Moon, they haven't really left. So maybe I'm wrong, but for now, I'm saying Leo's out and Andrew Scott's in.
I like your list. I was going to mention Leo. I do think the problem for Leo, and I call him Leo when we're hanging out, so I can say Leo, is that it's such a. I mean, when we in the episode about Killers of the Flower Moon, which people should really listen to, I really praised him because I think it's an important role, and I think he's doing something really important. But it's so subtle and just confusing enough that a lot of people kind of miss it, right? And I think I've heard more reaction asking like, well, why was he doing this when he loved his wife? Did he love his wife? Like, confusion about that can get read into the performance instead of kind of showing why the performance is really strong. So I would probably, if I had to put money down, though, I think I would pull Paul Giamatti out and put Leo in if my money was on the line. But I do like your pick of Jeffrey Wright. I just want to remind people he has an incredible speech in Asteroid City, and he could just get up on the microphone and say, if you wanted to live a nice, quiet, peaceful life, you picked the wrong time to get born, and walk off, and everything would be perfect in my life. But, I'm a huge Jeffrey Wright fan. I actually think an early movie that had a bizarrely large impact on me was Samuel L. Jackson's Shaft movie. And that was the first time I remember Jeffrey Wright. And it's like, since that movie, I've been like, this guy's awesome in whatever you ask him to do. And I think a lot of people noticed him at Westworld. And then this is the French Dispatch Hive. So we all know he carried a third of that movie and is so brilliant in it. The coffee table book about it just came out and it's really good, by the way. So I would like to see this nomination. I also think if it's the part I think it is, he gets to show a bit of comedy and a bit of pathos. And I think it's got to be a great performance. I really wish I could go see that movie, but I think that's gonna be the one that's next Friday for me. That's the one I'm stuck with, waiting till release date.
So I've heard this from, I think, more than one critic, and it's not particularly nice comment, that Jeffrey Wright is essentially giving a Paul Giamatti performance in American Fiction. And so by that logic, there's only room for one of them, I think. And I mean, by that, I think they mean that his character is like a curmudgeonly sort of like, you know what I mean? Like it's like that. It's a role that Paul Giamatti in a very different version of American Fiction, probably not one that could exist, but could play, right? And so I think, I'm like, this is getting tricky, this comparison. But I actually think I'm going extreme. I think this category is going to shock us a little bit. I think Leo and Paul Giamatti do not get in. So I think it's like people are too comfortable, and like, what's the most tragic outcome, right? Paul Giamatti snubbed for Sideways once again does not get in, right? Like, or, you know what I mean? Like, I think people want him to have an Oscar so badly. I think that's the reason that he's not going to get in, because that would be just tragic. And I think who I put in instead is actually Coleman Domingo in Rustin, a movie which I have partially seen.
I was gonna say, speaking as somebody who hasn't watched Rustin, maybe. I don't know. It didn't wow me, but go ahead. Sorry.
I say, well, so, but he's doing an Oscar-y performance in it. That's the thing. My short take on that movie is, or at least the first 45 minutes, which I watched and then was like, oh, I probably should finish this, and then I haven't. And that was like a week ago. My short take is that the movie tricked me into thinking it was like the West Wing for the civil rights movement, and I wanted that movie, and then it was like, oh wait, no, it's this other movie, and then I was like, I don't know what's going on. And it really is rushed. It's like like the music is like bing bam boom, we're getting things done, but it's really like, no, I cannot keep up with what's happening. Like, you're zooming through lots of history to kind of establish this character in a way that is too confusing for me. So, but Coleman Domingo, if you've seen him in anything else, is like completely transforming himself in this movie. Like, I think the last movie I saw him in was Zola. Did either of you see that? It's the like,
I heard good things, but I have
the like pole dancer movie. It is really good, and he's great in it. But he plays like a sort of showy pimp character. Like, it's like it's very, very different vibes. And so I think if people know Coleman Domingo, they see Rustin, they might be like, Rustin, but we've seen time and time again that people get in just for their performance, not for the movie that they're in some of these acting categories. So I feel like that's definitely a possibility. And Coleman Domingo, he'll also have Color Purple, which even if that movie doesn't do well, I think that gives him a bump in terms of visibility. And then apparently he's like ridiculously charming on the campaign trail. Like he's like the kissing babies, glad handling everybody in the room sort of actor. So
yeah, the second to last point you made is the one that I was thinking of, which is, given that this performance, I have not seen it. My short take on Rustin is we watched 3 movies for a Netflix episode, and only after the third one did Netflix tell me, oh, this movie you were thinking that you were waiting to come out actually came out like 3 weeks ago, but we just never mentioned it to you before, so you could watch Rustin, but I have not watched it yet. That, like, he disappears into that role. Seeing him in a very different mode in The Color Purple might get people to sort of say, oh yeah, like, that's interesting. Not like that I'm nominating him for The Color Purple, but that just reiterates how good he was in Rustin. And if, like you're saying, there's things feel a little sedentary, it's just sort of like, I don't need to vote for Leo, I don't need to vote for Giamatti, because like they're going to get nominated, whatever. Like, who do I want to look for instead on my nomination list? They might go to Coleman Domingo. So yeah, I had him at 7th as well. That, on the outside, but I think it's, he could easily slide in there, even though, again, the movie seems to be is not lighting the world on fire.
And Andrew Scott really feels like Paul Mescal in Aftersun, even though that's confusing because Paul Mescal is also in All of Us Strangers, I think. But I feel like there's always one sort of more indie pick in this category, and I can't think of who else that would be if it's not Andrew Scott.
And I forget which critic I'm ripping off. Don't forget that Fleabag was huge and people loved seeing him, and like that stays in people's minds when somebody from a major streaming phenomenon kind of comes across, and I think there's a good chance of that.
And don't sleep on Sherlock. People, like, a lot of people think of him still as Moriarty. So like he's got he's got this, and he has. I mean, we had some Felix Leiter erasure in the overview of Jeffrey Wright's career. He also had a prominent role in one of the lesser Daniel Craig Bond movies, basically playing Moriarty, but at MI6. But so I think that he feels a little bit like, oh yeah, like that's the indie person, but unlike Paul Mescal, who kind of felt like this guy's coming out of nowhere. This is Andrew Scott. Like, people have liked him for a long time, so. Yeah, I could see it. It could also just as easily be Giamatti and DiCaprio are in, and it's kind of the 5 that are expected. But I also think Jen's right. It could be a shakeup. I think any of those bottom 3 or all of them could fall out, and it could get wild.
I just want to also throw out, I don't think it'll happen, but Adam Driver was on SNL this week and is making so many interviews. I mean, I'm on the Star Wars parts of the internet. It's like every day it's like another round of, this is the weird offhanded thing he said about Kylo Ren this time, and here's 5 articles about it. So I think it matters when he circulates. And then the only other thing to say is RIP Joaquin Phoenix Napoleon nomination. Like, there was a time where we would have been sure that was in here, and absolutely not.
Let's talk to also RIP Joaquin Phoenix nominated for Beau is Afraid.
Beau is Afraid at Golden Globes.
Was the talk way a ways ago. And don't forget, there's one guy at the Golden Globes who still thinks Napoleon, Ridley Scott, Joaquin Phoenix, and Vanessa Kirby are all getting nominated. Like, he's right or dying.
Gold Derby?
At Gold Derby, yeah. Did I say Golden Globes? I meant Gold Derby.
Yeah.
Apologies. It was confusing. I screwed that up. I ruined my own joke. Last thing I will say in terms of long shots, but you can never count them out. Apparently, Freud's Last Session is still coming out in December to be eligible this year. Never count out Anthony Hopkins. I saw my first trailer for that. Anthony Hopkins is always lurking, and he's stealing your Oscars, especially if you are a famous black man that everybody wants to win. So Jeffrey Wright, be careful. Keep your eyes peeled.
Oh no!
Wait, but they were both in Westworld, right? So they're buddies. So yeah, like that counts for anything. But
Anthony Hopkins is looking at his 3rd Oscar, saying, "Doesn't look like anything to me."
Yeah.
I have not heard a single good thing about that movie, though. And I originally was very interested because I was like, Freud and C.S. Lewis in a room talking together.
The trailer did not look good.
With Matthew Good from Downton Abbey, and other things. I think he's also on The Crown. But sign me up. But then every critic that mentions this movie is like, man, no, like, very disappointing. So that's, I like that as an outside kind of possibility. All right, so I think next up we have our biggest slugfest, Best Actress. Greg, break it down for us.
Oh man, this was a hard one. So I don't know if you all were paying attention to the Google Doc. I was just shuffling around my rankings as PT started talking. So if you heard him lose his train of thought, it's because my cursor distracted him, dear audience members. So all right, I'm gonna go. And I also just cheated and looked at Variety, and they have a wacky list for this one, including Lily Gladstone is a maybe to them, might sneak in. I was like, this is not worth paying attention to, and that's because Lily Gladstone is absolutely the front runner here. She's my number 1. I do think all signs point to her. As has been said on this episode, maybe taking all the clout of that movie, which based on how they're out there, I would say all the creative team of Killers of the Flower Moon would be okay with. I think they've all thrown their star power onto her and talked about her story and her path to that. So I'm going to call her the biggest lock. The change I made, and I'm going to say this is my bias based on what I've seen, I bumped Carey Mulligan all the way up to number 2 on this list, because I was not expecting how central she is to Maestro. God, there were like 3 sentences I wanted to say right there, but I won't. Is she? I didn't realize that.
I think she's billed before Bradley Cooper in promotional materials, at least.
And she is pretty fantastic in that. So I bumped her way up. Now, I do also think Emma Stone is a complete lock here. So I'm going to call those 3 like absolutely going to be in there. I have yet to see Poor Things. I'm going tomorrow night finally, so I will be able to weigh in. By all accounts, she's incredible. I also think some of the things we were talking about, she's so in the zeitgeist with The Curse right now too, because some people have Showtime. I don't know who these people are. Who pays for Showtime in the year of our Lord 2023?
I think it is.
Showtime's now in Paramount Plus, so it's the people who it's Star Trek
Oh.
fans and Mission Impossible fans who pay for Paramount Plus. And there's also sports stuff on there, so they're the ones.
And
who
you
get
have to add an extra though, because I pay for Paramount Plus.
No, not
I'm
anymore.
not paying for Showtime.
No,
No.
Paramount Plus is in now. Showtime's in Paramount Plus Basic. That's the move, because Paramount Plus now you pay more than you used to. So that's the trick, is you lost.
See, this is the secret. This is my secret. I canceled Paramount Plus a year ago, and they never stopped giving me access. So maybe I'm in a free version or something. But yes, don't cut this out, Jen. No, you don't really have to. But yeah, they Oh man,
Sorry, I couldn't resist. I've been waiting for a moment to use that all episode.
Wow. All right. So Lily Gladstone, Carey Mulligan, Emma Stone, Sandra Hüller for I'm saying for Anatomy of a Fall. I recognize you have to specify which film, but that is her language switching. She carries that movie. So I feel like if you love that movie, you love that performance. I don't think Snoop the dog is female, so she's safe from Snoop taking the momentum out of Anatomy of a Fall. And then, I don't know, by the time you get down here, I threw in Natalie Portman because there's so much positive buzz around May, December right now. And of course, I'm a devotee of the Divine Miss Portman, but it's such a weird part. And I think it's a very actory part for obvious reasons. So that probably gets her the nomination. But that's the one I'm not sure of, because I do think there are some people who are kind of saying like, yeah, she's kind of too weird and doesn't belong there. So because I didn't get to share May December thoughts, I do think the very, very last scene, and I will keep it spoiler free, actually finally locked in that character. It was like I didn't get it until that last scene. It was like, oh, so the whole point of this is that. So total nonsense because we're keeping it spoiler free.
No one's gonna understand what you're saying. Just
except the people who have seen it. They're like, he's right. He's so smart, and they're crying right now. They're like,
that is this.
Yeah,
he's right.
Yeah. So I'm gonna leave her at my number 5, more out of Queen Amidala loyalty than anything else. But those are my 5. This is a stacked category. I will throw it over to you all to tear me apart. But I do just want to say, if we go 4 for 4 on our predictions, we have all people of color winning the acting races straight across the board, which would be an incredibly good night at the Oscars and important. But is it very likely? Probably not. But I think worth noting that we at least have embraced the new Hollywood if the Academy is slow to do so.
I was going to just mention before we leave May, December, on our review with Antonio for the 3 Netflix movies, I came so close because he asked me, he's like, it sounds like Natalie Portman is your favorite performance. And I almost was like, Queen Amidala, come on. But then I was like, oh, he's not like a huge Star Wars nerd. So maybe I should keep those comments to myself. But this is a safe zone for Star Wars comments. And, you know, we can't forget. So yeah, this category is crazy. I do agree with your 3 locks. I think if Anatomy of a Fall makes it into Best Picture, Sandra Hüller is in. And I think she gets the zone of interest bump too, regardless of how well that movie does, right? Because people are like thinking of both of those performances probably as they're voting. I had Fantasia Barrino in here when I thought Color Purple was going to be this thing that I was underestimating. Now I don't. After the Golden Globe snub, which just like the more I think about it is so bizarre, because it's like this is the one place it should be getting in, because it has a musical comedy category and it's not getting in it. So it had every opportunity to make it in there. Why didn't it? Very weird. What does that mean? And so I think I kind of took her out. And I think, sort of go back to what I opened with earlier when I was talking about screenplay, Barbie's way up for me. So I think this is the first time I'm willing to entertain maybe Margot Robbie makes it in. I would not have said that until maybe this week. So because I think my kind of stance on her not getting into this category was like, wouldn't it be terrible if like Barbie gets all these nominations and the person who made it all happen and is at the center of the movie does not get nominated? Wouldn't that be the most Oscars thing ever? And also I feel like her performance is so central to the movie, but is pretty undetectable in terms of the degree of difficulty for most viewers. I think like I see it as being like this really complicated, hard thing. And if you just go watch the actors on actors interview, she comes away with that as like the winner. Cillian Murphy is lovely, but like she dominated that interview, and like she did all her homework. And suddenly I'm like, I want to be friends with Margot Robbie because she's like the researcher overachiever, which I did not know. She's like, it sounds like she just obsessively does her homework all the time, and I'm like, yes, like I understand. I see you, Margot Robbie. So for that reason, like I'm willing to kind of put her in there. I think those are probably the two other ones that I would say.
I mean, I'm just going to note this, and again, I'm going back to my score chart from a subreddit, a great source, to say, okay, that looking at, again, this includes the Golden Globes, but a lot of its critics associations from around different countries, that both Carey Mulligan and Margot Robbie, they have 4 and 5 nominations respectively out of 12 total things. So they're outside of the top 5. The other 4, it's Lily Gladstone, Emma Stone, Sandra Hüller, and Natalie Portman, have between 6 and 12. The 5th person, and I cannot believe that it's taken this long to mention her, is Greta Lee for Past Lives, where there is some Past Lives resurgence. Again, it's critics. Yeah. Who knows if this can actually carry forward. I think there's a Globe nomination, but again, it's drama versus musical comedy. There is, but again, there's 12 nominees now for Best Actress at the Globes. So it's I'm not saying that it's likely, but with this tension of just like, oh my God, all these great performances, what are we going to do? And I can attest in the way that Greg can attest that Carey Mulligan's excellent in Maestro. Emma Stone is incredible. She's out of control in Poor Things. She's so good. And if it weren't for Lily Gladstone, I would just be like, yeah, lock it up. Like, this is done. Like, this is over. So I do feel like it's still going to be the two of them, but I can see the sort of, because Emma Stone's already won, Lily Gladstone has sort of been like the presumed winner for so long that people might start looking at Carey Mulligan and be like, well, wait a minute. Like, she's central to this, and actually she's kind of overdue, and like that might happen. And then everyone else, it's that sort of that trio's happening up top, and anything can happen in the other two in terms of nominations. So I'm not going to sleep on Greta Lee. I think she still might make it through. I think ultimately Greg's list is correct, because I think May December has a lot more momentum. Is that going to carry forward for another month or so? I don't know. But right now I would say Natalie Portman is in. And I think that because she has 2 apparently very different, amazing performances, and there's always that love, like we were saying in supporting actress, it's true in Best Actress too, for who's the international performer from, especially from Europe.
Yeah.
Who's that person we can bring in and give a little bump to? I actually wouldn't be surprised if Sandra Hüller got nominated for Anatomy of a Fall, and that's it for that movie. I mean, I hope Anatomy of a Fall gets more. I do think it's likely in screenplay, but I don't think it would be that surprising for her to still make it through, even if all the other support fades away.
I can see that. I think, I don't know. I think I'm protecting my heart with Greta Lee. I think that's why I'm not putting her on any of my lists.
I respect it.
Because I don't want to get my hopes up. And I'd love to see it, though.
Emma Stone is a previous winner, and Natalie Portman is. And then Margot Robbie also is, right? So there's a lot of repeats here, right? Didn't Margot Robbie
win for Wolf? Did she?
No.
She would have been supporting.
She didn't.
She was nominated.
Right.
She's been nominated a few times, but I don't even think she was nominated for Wolf of Wall Street. I think she got nominated for Bombshell the year of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yeah.
But I think that's it. Oh, she got nominated for I, Tonya as well, but has not won either one.
Well, and
do you think that translates into a she's due narrative? Like, is she due because of that?
I'm gonna just say I completely agree. Especially the performance has a physicality that is really important and totally subtle that you would miss it. I will just say Jen's Margot Robbie as Lisa Simpson is very compelling and should be a T-shirt we sell. But I think that actually to me speaks to the fact that she'll get nominated as a producer on this when Barbie gets maybe some other kind of nomination. So, so much of the narrative around her is like she made this happen, but I
Yeah.
interpret that as not she's such a great actor. This happened. It's she throwing her power around, talking to the right people, and being a really good producer. So, I think she deserves the nomination for that. But I would swap out Margot Robbie and Natalie Portman pretty easily. I like the idea of protecting our hearts around Greta Lee, but we were just last episode talking about that morning show Across the Spider-Verse synergy,
True.
like 4 quadrant Greta Lee fans just all out here ready to see it happen. But I
Russian
think
Doll Hive is ready. They're ready to
right.
get
I forgot about Russian
get her
Doll.
in there.
Yeah, that's when everybody's beleaguered and falling down with fatigue. Over the hill comes the Russian doll with Natasha Lyonne on a horse as Gandalf riding down the hill. So I would like to see it. I think I will just say Past Lives feels like the kind of movie that I would never call people this, but Jen calls people normies. And normies hate when movies like that get nominated because it feels like it's such a niche product. And everything Jen said before about like that's lessening over time. But I always think of my sister, who I love very much, who's always like, I read through the list of all the nominees and I only saw the animated movies this year, right? Like there's this way in which like these niche products are what's hurting the ratings and what's hurting enthusiasm. So I do think we've moved away from that a little bit, and especially this year with Barbie and Oppenheimer and things people saw a lot, then I think there's a better chance for Margot Robbie than Greta Lee, unfortunately.
But does Celine Song have a chance in director, PT?
What a great transition. According to my list, no, but she is on. Where was she? She was my number 6 right now, which is wild because I think my real snub. I mean that my real snub's at number 7. So my list for best director as it stands right now, Christopher Nolan. Number 1 with a bullet. I also think still the favorite to win. There's been an interesting trend of him winning Best Director, not at a ton, but at a few of the major critics awards. But Oppenheimer not winning Best Picture, we can get when we talk Best Picture. We can maybe discuss who's winning over there. But I think that there's a real sort of Nolan is certainly ensconced for a nomination and is still the front runner for winning. After that is Martin Scorsese and Yorgos Lanthimos for Killers of the Flower Moon and Poor Things, respectively. Those feel, again, that trio has been the kind of engine of the season in terms of hype for a while, and I think that's still true here in director. Both of those guys have their place locked in. Again, starts to get a little, we could start swapping out at 4 and 5. But right now, for the Barbie momentum that Jen has been talking about, I have Greta Gerwig in there, along with the on some level, I'm sure the Academy is like, wouldn't it be great if it wasn't all dudes? And let me double check. All white dudes getting in, which is what it could be if we don't have someone else. And if it's not Greta Lee, maybe Greta Gerwig. I'm sorry, Celine Song. Greta Lee is the actress. Celine Song potentially is the director. I got so excited about a Battle of the Gretas joke that I misnamed who did what in that movie. And then in last, because of some of the things we've been talking about of the increase of opinion and some of the momentum as it's been in the theaters and we get closer to it coming out on Netflix, I do have Bradley Cooper getting in this group for Best Director, and for Maestro as the last person in, with the snub being Jonathan Glazer, who has been sort of a presumed nominee for a lot of the year for the Zone of Interest. Again, maybe that will change. Zone of Interest actually comes out. As Greg was saying, people get to actually see it. And even if it's not the super fun time for the whole family, they're just like, apparently just, it's an incredible experience, and folks are wowed at what Jonathan Glazer was able to do. but right now there's not a lot of momentum for him. So I have Bradley Cooper in, again, Celine Song and Jonathan Glazer just on the outside at 6 and 7.
Yeah, I had him in my list when we did our premature predictions, and I've since knocked him out. But he could very easily be in, I think, because for what I said earlier, where people, when they talk about Zone of Interest, they really talk about his directing and how he kind of conceived of the film. I've heard the word like Big Brother. Like apparently he like sort of filmed it like a reality TV show, and people were like, that's really inspired. So yeah, I think he definitely could be in. The thing that's torturing me is that the last few years there's always been one sort of token international director, or like a director of the frontrunner of the international feature kind of ends up in here. And that doesn't fit neatly into that because, well, like Anatomy Fall, I think is going to do pretty well, but that didn't get picked by France. So that's not technically in international feature. So like, does Justine Triet still get in? But we also have Yorgos Lanthimos. We have Jonathan Glazer. Like in theory, both of those people can satisfy the international spot. And so I'm just confused about that. Cause I think last year, I believe it was Josh Parham inspired me to pick Ruben Östlund. So I correctly predicted that the Ruben Östlund, the Triangle of Sadness thing, very few people saw coming, but I was like, his logic of like, well, they really love Ruben Östlund and there needs to be an international director in this group. Who's it going to be? And so I'm like, that's the thing that's kind of like plaguing me is like, but who is that? There's multiple possible candidates and none of them like quite neatly fit into that category. So that, I don't know. That's a very me problem. I'm trying to get this exactly right. But I think I didn't have Bradley Cooper in before. Now I have him in because Maestro seems to be really on the upswing. And I feel like the narrative of him not getting nominated for A Star is Born. And I was sort of thinking of him when I made my opening joke of like, PT will never forget that snub when I introed you. I'm thinking of Bradley Cooper because I feel like, to me, it seems like he didn't get nominated for directing A Star is Born, and he wants to be known as a director. And I think that has fueled his fire ever since. And I think that's how Maestro gets made. Yeah, a movie I have not seen, but I feel like I can still say that. It feels like he wants this so badly. And I think what a great redemption narrative for the Academy. You know what I mean?
And again, I'm not going to spoil Maestro, but I will also not spoil his DGA. But I will say you could tell the room was really into how he was talking about his directing and the things he was doing, all the right moves of praising crew members and collaborators and making sure all the spotlight got off of him. But oops, isn't it just so great that I happen to assemble all these people into my movie? And it's really lame, but what is conducting in the cinema world except directing, right? And getting all your production heads to work in symphony. I'm gonna just beat this metaphor like a dead horse.
Love it.
So I think he's in. I was struggling as PT was talking because I really want to see Celine Song in that category. I really hate that it's probably like you were saying, we recognize Greta Gerwig for her writing, not her directing. We shouldn't have to choose between ladies, but this is the Academy, so they will choose between ladies.
And the director's branch in particular has this problem too.
Yes,
I think more so than others.
Mm-hmm.
Good point. I also wanted to ask, forgive my ignorance, Yorgos is American? I am not the biggest Yorgos fan.
He's Greek. He's from Greece, but he's been making movies in America
Greek.
for a long time. Yes.
Yes.
But his first 3 or 4 movies are Greek language movies from before The Lobster.
This is a guy who has very specific taste. So it's interesting that Poor Things is doing so well, kind of mainstream.
I think Poor Things is an American production though, right?
Yes.
So that's why that was my confusion, because I'm like, are people going to think of Yorgos as international, even though Poor Things is not?
Yeah, they might think of him as like, oh, this is our international director. This could be the Ruben Östlund, but it kind of sounds like the movie could have a similar production story with Emma Stone as Barbie has with Margot Robbie. Obviously, very different, but like Emma Stone seems to have been like,
right,
I want to work with this director again after The Favorite. We're developing this. We're producing this together. and I'm making this movie happen.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
it's so that's
Not unlike Natalie Portman bringing the script for May December to
Oh, that's true. Todd Haynes.
Todd Haynes. Thank you. So
agreed. What I'll say, sort of, I guess, against my list, but in favor of some of the things that Jen was saying, of this sort of weird cusping of Jonathan Glazer, having Bradley Cooper in as a sort of make good for A Star Is Born. Could it be like Paul Giamatti, where it's just like everyone thinks, of course, well, we'll get him, and then it ends up tumbling into another snub. And if it were for Jonathan Glazer, I wonder if, part of the Jonathan Glazer narrative is people talking about he's one of his generation's like great filmmakers, but this is only his fourth movie in 23 years, and his other ones were Sexy Beast, Birth, and Under the Skin, and each of those kind of came and went when they came out, and people were like, wait, this movie's actually like kind of really good. And then the season's over, the year's over, a couple of years down the road, folks were like, you know what movie is actually one of the best movies of that year is the Jonathan Glazer movie. And so will there be folks especially in the director's branch, who are like, maybe we should get on the train now, instead of like this being the snub down the road that we look back on and regret? And will that narrative start to creep in and take over, especially if I don't know if this is in any way relevant to the voting or anything like that, but there has not, up till maybe very recently, there hasn't been a clear quote unquote Oscar villain this season, in the way that, say, like a Green Book was, or I'm trying to remember like who. I mean, the Fabelmans kind of was last year. Like, a lot of people were just like, we're against the Fabelmans. We're very pro Fabelmans here, but I think that the momentum of, the Fabelmans is going to win, I think, turned people on that movie last year. And I don't think anyone's turned as much on any, Killers of the Flower Moon maybe has that position. I'm sure there's folks that are over Oppenheimer or over Barbie, but no one feels like anger towards them. I kind of feel like, at least in the online chatosphere, people are starting to be like, who needs to calm down is Bradley Cooper. Like, he really wants an Oscar. He's begging for it. He, the whole thing with the nose, the like, I spent years doing this, like I stayed in character, right. I did all this stuff. It's just like, calm down.
His publicists are working very hard.
Yes,
they got that story out about him spending 6 years to learn how to conduct or whatever.
Right. The one thing. So it's like, is it, so like, it's possible that there is some blowback. Again, that might be fan chatter, and whatever film Twitter is now that Twitter no longer exists, but like what the remnants of that, the diaspora of film Twitter, might turn on him. But that would be a path for Jonathan Glazer to make his way back in.
So I mentioned Josh Parham from Next Best Picture helped me guess Ruben Östlund. So I was like, I should look up what his predictions are right now. And he has Christopher Nolan, Martin Scorsese, Yorgos Lanthimos, Jonathan Glazer, Celine Song is his number 5. And he has Bradley Cooper in 8th.
Dang.
Wow.
Oh, wait. But he also has Celine Song listed twice. So now I'm confused. So that might be...
It's so good. It's so good. Give her 2 chances and a nomination.
I have a feeling one of those is supposed to be Justine Triet, because she's not on here at all. So I bet maybe he thinks Celine Song number 5, because I think people were shocked by the Golden Globe nomination. So I think that made her bump up a lot of people's lists. And then maybe his number 7 might be Justine Triet. But he basically has all the female directors like just outside the category.
I mean, in terms of predicting, it's unfortunately not a bad path to take.
Yeah, which I don't like, but
to throw just a couple extra names just to have it in the mix, and you can pull the sound clip if it ends up either of these end up happening. Alexander Payne, The Holdovers is kind of fading away, but who knows? Like, the Academy does like him. He's been nominated multiple times before. And then for a newcomer, and it's like, well, if you don't want to nominate a woman, what if you nominated a man of color? Cord Jefferson for American Fiction could if that movie really takes off, he might be able to get in here.
And both he and Celine Song have the first timer narrative, right? Cord Jefferson mostly directed, like I think only directed TV before American Fiction, and then Celine Song was a playwright before Past Lives. So that could be a narrative that gets out there.
Well, and I just want to joke, when I pulled up Variety before and was cheating, all the ads that filled the screen were for your consideration for Saltburn for Best Picture and Emerald Fennell. So clearly in her contract, she had that they had to really push her, which I do not think is happening. I do not think should happen, but it makes me laugh when you see those kind of, oh, there's no momentum behind this film, but clearly they had to buy a lot of ad space for, contractual reasons.
And Greg, that's cheating.
You would love driving around LA. Because the billboards and the bus ads, it's incredible. It's like, don't forget Ridley Scott for Napoleon. It's like, we already have. Don't worry about it.
I was going to say, Greg, that's not cheating. That's research.
True.
At least on this show. That's all I do is look up other people's Oscar prediction lists.
Our listeners are clearly worried that we have snubbed our one woman on this podcast by taking extra categories. What they haven't yet figured out is that Jen took the only 10 nominee category, which is why she sat out that round, because she has to do double duty this round. So, Jen, I think it's time you nailed down your Best Picture nominees.
All right, let's do this. So, typically, this feels good to me until I get to number 8 every year. And then the last 2 or 3, I'm just like, is it this or is it this? And then inevitably, those are the ones I'm most likely to get wrong. So I think unlike some of the other categories, this gets more interesting, I think, as the list goes down. So I have Oppenheimer, Barbie, can't count out Barbenheimer's got to be in there, right? Like, I think there's no way those two don't get picked Best Picture. Killers of the Flower Moon, we love a good Scorsese epic. Poor Things, some people think it's too weird and are uncomfortable with these sex scenes, but I think that the critical acclaim is still strong enough that it gets a spot in here. Maestro, we see all of our comments about Maestro Bradley Cooper from this entire episode. I think it's like, it's one of those things I can't wait to see because I want to be so wrong. Because I think when I saw that trailer originally, I was like, oh, this is such typical Oscar bait. Roll my eyes. Bradley Cooper, like, I'm so sad for you. I'm sorry you didn't get nominated for Best Director. Right. That was kind of what I was coming into it. But the critical reception of it and Greg's now endorsement of it, I think I'm like, oh, I'm ready to see this movie and be really excited about it. Past Lives. This would have been at the bottom of my list not even like a week or 2 ago, but it's gotten such a good precursor love and is so strong right now that I'm like, it's got to be in here. It easily takes the like small movie spot that is often has 1 or 2 small movie spots in here. American Fiction, similar. That one's really, I think, just starting to be on the upswing, and I've only heard good things about it from critics, and I think it's one of those things because it's so funny and it checks so many boxes for the Academy. I think it's funny, it's entertaining. My understanding is that it's like a heartwarming family story somehow as well. It's kind of about the craft. It's about writing and about storytelling, and it has a social issue dimension to it, right? Of like, how do we represent race and culture in America? So I don't know. That seems like it has a really good shot right now of getting in. Okay, this is where it gets really rockety. So I have the holdovers, but per our previous discussions, I feel like I would now probably put that in my 10th spot. The other 2 I have in here are Anatomy of a Fall and May December. Now, typically, there always has to be an international feature in here. That's been a track record, I think, since Roma. I want to say, was it the first one? There might have been one before that, but it's consistently there's something from international feature carries over. And again, as I said with director, the thing that makes that complicated this year is that Anatomy of a Fall, which I think is the most popular international feature this year, did not get chosen by France to be submitted in the international feature category. And so it's like, what does that mean for this? I think there's actually going to be backlash voting where people are going to be like, what? France, you're crazy. Like, this movie was amazing. And then it's more likely because of that. I think I'm on an island with that because I've asked around or listened around and stuff like that, and people are just like, no, that makes it actually less likely. But also its precursor performance so far, I think, has been very strong. May December, I think per all the things we've said before, has a strong spot. It feels like the sort of smaller movie. And then also, like, what else? I guess Maestro is Netflix, so they could be competing against each other. That would be the reason I wouldn't put it on here. But I don't know. That's where I'm at right now.
I think it's a good list. I think all of your reasoning makes a lot of sense. I agree with you that the top 7 feel pretty locked in. But I'm partially saying that because I want Past Lives to be locked in. I'm still worried that there's going to be another round of momentum shakeup and Past Lives suddenly gets forgotten again. I will say it might be a benefit to Past Lives that the weird reconstructed Golden Globes category for what we think of as either international or foreign language movie is non-English language. So Past Lives, even though it's a US movie, is in that category. I don't know the degree to which the voters are locked in on that, but I feel like, does that going to maybe trigger in their brains of like, yeah, we've got a little international movie. It's Past Lives. It's South Korea, like, and Toronto, like it's a international movie. And so, is that maybe going to help that, but then maybe hurt Anatomy of a Fall if that box seems checked for a lot of people? I don't know. There's also some degree of like, well, what's outside? I mean, there's the zone of interest, which I think, in terms of the the precursors, my little precursor list over here, that's the only one that's gotten 5 or more best picture listings, nominations across the Critics' Choice that isn't on your 10, because there's 11 movies that have gotten 5 or more, and so Zone of Interest is the one on the outside that could maybe be jockeying for a position. The only other movie I'll mention, which again I guess I'm soft pushing as potentially getting momentum down the road, is All of Us Strangers, which could that be, if they would we want another small movie, we have a couple big blockbusters, we have some big sprawling epics, instead of the, again, major bummer movie of Zone of Interest, or if people are sort of over the Holdovers, is it going to be instead a sad movie, but a sad intimate story, like All of Us Strangers.
So All of Us Strangers, my counterpoint to that is that earlier I said it feels like an After Sun that got Paul Mescal in nomination but did not get into Best Picture. It feels like that kind of movie to me, where it would get a nomination in a category but not make it into Best Picture. So because unless it has, okay, here's my you have to do Oscars math, because it's like, to get into Best Picture, what are like the 2 or 3 other categories that it gets into? You know what I mean? So I think All of Us Strangers, I'm just not confident enough that it gets in enough places to get it into Best Picture. Because right now I think Andrew Scott is his best shot. Maybe Screenplay. If it gets into Screenplay, then we're talking. But like, yeah, that's the only one. And then The Color Purple, I feel like, I don't remember if you mentioned this, but that's the big question mark. Because like I've been on a roller coaster with this movie that I haven't even seen. And it's like, at first I was like, nah, people are out on musicals. See West Side Story. Like, we don't have to worry about Color Purple. And then people started seeing it at screenings, and then the buzz was good. And I was like, oh, maybe Color Purple. And then it misses at a bunch of key things like Golden Globes. And then I'm like, are we out on Color Purple again? What is happening? So I guess I just have to see this movie to really decide for myself.
I will just say, and I don't want to cut Greg off, but I am, that my only reason for advocating for All of Us Strangers is not because I think it has a strong path, but because of the weakness of what's sort of jostling at the bottom. Like, no one has a firm grip there. Yeah. So something could just easily slide away, and a movie you don't expect, because now that it's locked in at 10 now, right? Like, it can't be like separated by votes of only 8 or 9. I think that there has to be 10.
Yeah, I think so.
The 10th movie might get way less support than the top 9, and it could end up like some movie sprouting up unexpectedly.
Right. No, I hear you.
So I was thinking a lot about last year, and I was thinking there's always something really kind of weirdly conservative that makes it in and we don't get. And so last year I was thinking it's a little unfair to call it weirdly conservative, but All Quiet on the Western Front, which is really well made and really, a good movie and deserving of its nomination. But it was like, that came out at the last second, and it's like, 1917 kind of played that role before, where it's like, this is old fashioned Oscar bait. And so I think in some ways, PT already mentioned Zone of Interest could sneak in that kind of lane. Not that I think that's exactly the right kind of thing, but something kind of tried and true, a Holocaust movie. I'm thinking there's an old joke on extras. That's right. Like just do the Holocaust movie and you'll get nominated. And I think there's something like that. A really long shot could be Napoleon, because it's like, well, we don't like it anywhere else. I mean, it might get like some sound nominations, but like it's good old fashioned spectacle. I see the faces you're making. It's terrible. I'm on record as not liking it, but like
I guess
there's a weird contingent of voters who like a good old fashioned war movie, and that's the lane.
You're describing Elvis from last year, I think. So you're not
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah. I don't want it to happen. I'm just trying to think there. And I was going to mention Color Purple, but Jen beat me to that one. So I think we should just also recognize nobody's giving any thought to Air, which would be the last of the Golden Globe nominees. If you smash together the 12, that's the one we're not mentioning. And doesn't need to be mentioned. It's not going to make it in, but it is just kind of crazy that it's like somehow a Golden Globe nominee and not at all part of this conversation. So shout out to Air.
To support Greg, because I was making a face when he said Napoleon. Like, what if, to go back to my dream, at least from the Napoleon review episode, that the director's cut, the 4-hour director's cut is good. What if they're just sort of like, okay, people don't like Napoleon, but they're just like, New Year's Day, we're dropping Napoleon and the director's cut on Apple TV Plus, and people are like, wait, the director's cut's wonderful. Like, suddenly, in
and
addition,
then it surges.
Sound, costume design. I feel like there's technical things that, like, it could easily get.
Yeah.
Like, could that then suddenly,
right,
be that 10th movie where it's like, I don't know, I liked 8 of these, and I don't know, just throw some votes for some other ones. It's possible. I don't think it's particularly likely. I think it's more likely that Zone of Interest is trying to chip away at the bottom 3 here. I would also just like to note, and I know I'm not alone in this, like, The Holdovers is great. Like, The Holdovers should be kind of locked in. It's a bummer that one's fading away. And I know we don't agree on this, but I'm glad May December is sort of on the rise. I hope that sort of gets a place. This is such a good year that, like, I don't really want any of our list to fall off, but also that there's these other movies, some of which we haven't seen, that I'm hoping are so good that I want them to crash in. So good problems.
Also,
I guess.
In defense of my Napoleon move, to our listeners, please note that Jen listed the 10 best movies of the year. PT stole the next 3 or 4. What was I left to talk about? What was it? What, you leave me scraps. I'm going to talk about scraps. So,
Greg, I left you the Iron Claw. It was right there for you.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true.
No, I look, I think that's not going to happen, but I wanted something to talk about.
I mean,
thinking,
that's making me think Zac Efron could get in for best, I guess. Oh, would it be best actor?
It would be best actor.
Probably.
Yeah.
No, okay, never mind.
It could be the bear. I don't forget his name. The bear.
Oh, he can make it supporting.
Yeah.
I can see that getting a lone acting nomination potentially.
That's like the Fleabag actor, right? Like, everybody's been watching The Bear, so and he's going to win an Emmy and maybe a Golden Globe right then. So we forget the Emmys are this month too.
Yes.
I will just say, I was joking with PT about how everybody is regretting their December 22nd. If we were not recording tonight, mystery date whenever we were recording, I would be at Iron Claw, because Iron Claw, they're sneaking out a little early. They decided, like, let's do a round of preview screenings to get it out there. So I don't think its chances are dead, but I think it's my read on it is it's too weird. I don't think wrestling has reached the mainstream. I think it is more accepted than it once was as an art form, but I do not think your average moviegoer is like, I can't wait to see the wrestling movie.
I will note, Greg, the accepted term is sports entertainment, not art form. But I will say the people that I know or have seen comments, who are like folks that are into wrestling, like apparently in that, like if you're a fan of wrestling, this is a very like well-known story. And their comment is like, people going to see this movie are not prepared for how crazy the story gets and
That's
how
what I've
bad
heard
it is
too.
for everyone involved. So it also might be very depressing in a way that the trailer, with its like, you know, late 70s, early 80s rock anthems and folks slamming on the ring and just, you know, some crying, I guess, but, you know, mostly dudes being dudes, and with an abusive dad, like all of that, like, you know, looks like it's going to go one way, but I guess it might really spiral out of control in a way that isn't going to get people, you know, hooting and hollering when they leave the theater.
All right. Any closing thoughts? I think PT, did you actually want to? I feel like we're good to end here. Or do you
Yeah,
want
that's
to do?
fine.
Okay.
We don't have to do
Because
that.
I'm just seeing the thing about the draft. Doc,
I just put it in. We don't have to talk
just in
about it.
case. Okay. I feel like maybe
That
we
can
can do
be
that.
another
We
time.
can talk about that on the next one, or like when we get closer to the Oscars.
Yeah, I agree.
Or
I
we can
have
do
a
it like
closing
when.
thought.
Okay. Closing thought. Thanks, Greg. Go for it.
I mean, you could keep fighting about that for another 10 minutes and then we could end. But so my closing thought is it's been a freaking good year in movies. And I'm so scared for next year because of the aftermath of the strike. But I think if you added up all across these categories, there is easily 20 or 30 movies here that are really excellent and worth your time. And you know, as critics have started to put together their top 10 or top 5 of the year, it's like, oh, it's actually competitive this year for the first time in a long time. And it's not you know, when I'm putting together my list for the end of the year, I'm not going to have a lot of Marvel or a lot of franchise stuff. I will have one notable franchise film, but you know, I just don't think it's unusual in the last 20 years, at least the last decade, to get such a rich year of movies that aren't all kind of expected. So I just don't want to lose sight of that. It's been a really great year of movies. So sorry next year when Dune just has to win all the awards because there's nothing else.
And in case listeners, you were wondering what franchise movie Greg was referring to. He just fist pumped.
The Spider-Verse disrespect from Greg. That's fine. That's fine.
Well, so to kind of pick up on what you're saying, Greg, what's so interesting to me when I look at our predictions is at first I was like, wait, where are our blockbusters? But it's Barbie and Oppenheimer, which is nuts.
Yeah.
Right? That those are both Oscar-friendly films, or especially Oppenheimer, right? It's typical Oscar fare, but then also really popular with the mainstream box office success, but then also has kind of critical backing. It's crazy. It's just crazy that we have the selection that we have to work with this year.
Good year.
Yeah, good year. And this has been a good episode. I really love nothing more than like hashing out predictions. I'm a maniac when it comes to this sort of stuff, and so this has been so fun. So thank you to you both. PT, if people want to follow the show or yell at us about how wrong some of our predictions are, what can they do?
A great thing to do would be to follow us on Instagram and or Threads at The Long Take Review. Leave some comments there. If you'd like to speak to us directly in a non-public way, you could send us an email, thelongtakereview@gmail.com.
And Greg, you are the busiest man in podcasting. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're working on and where we can find you?
Yeah, it was a really good episode and fun to have some fights and to you know, debate. I was gonna challenge PT to make a ballot people could print out with our predictions on it, but that's gonna wait till the final round when everything's there. So we will help people cheat on their Oscar pools when the time comes. This is just preliminary. So I continue to be the co-host of Through the Glass Columns, a Wheel of Time podcast. If you love Celine's song, listen to our episodes about the show where she frequently gets mentioned, and Past Lives gets more than one reference because she was a key part of the first season of the Wheel of Time television show. And then I'm on Substack at Ion Cannon. You can find all my writing at ioncannon.com. And I am now Ion Cannon on Letterboxd because PT pointed out how dorky Jen and I were for having Star Wars names on Letterboxd. So I switched mine. It's EYEONCANON on Letterboxd. So thank you to PT for making me grow up.
That was pure jealousy. That was not meant to bully you into changing it, for the record. I just wish I had been that creative.
I'm not changing mine. So you can find me on Letterboxd at Qui-Gon Jen forever and ever. And you can also find me on Threads and Instagram at Subchokchai, SOPCHOCKCHAI. And, PT told us how you can get in touch with the show. Let us know what your Oscar predictions are. Who do you think we snubbed? And let us know. And everyone have a happy holidays. Stay warm. And we'll see you in the new year, probably.
It's Christmas, Theo. It's the time of miracles.
Thank you for listening. You can follow The Long Take on Substack at thelongtake.substack.com. Subscribe for free to receive reviews of films with Oscar buzz, as well as new films and series from pop franchises like Star Wars and Marvel.
They can also there's some strong cat agitation.
Cat cameo. Oh no.
Oh no.
Tauntaun.
Okay.
Tauntaun is freaked out at the idea of not getting the latest episodes of the Long Take review as soon as they drop.
Sorry, that is my cat. They're not usually in here when we're recording, but they were both sleeping so nicely when I walked in that I didn't have the heart to kick them out, and now this is what happens when I do that. So
that's okay.